All right, gang, here we are live Saturday night from Richmond, Philly, and I think Louisiana, if I remember correctly. This is John Shinholser, your host tonight, person in long-term recovery from substance use disorder. For me, that means I've been drug and alcohol free for almost 38 years, living the dream, got to pinch myself every day, make sure it's real. Got two great guests tonight. I think a lot of y'all probably know both of them. One of them's Camille Schrier, the current 2020 Miss America, and the wonderful pharmacist Dan Schneider. And I'm going to let them take it away and introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. And we'll get right into, I think, what's going to be a fabulous show tonight. Camille, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, guys. I'm Camille Schrier. I am originally from outside of Philadelphia area, but I am kind of a Richmond native now because I am attending Virginia Commonwealth University to get my Doctor of Pharmacy degree. Before that, I graduated from Virginia Tech with degrees in biochemistry and systems biology. I'm a nerdy scientist. I'm the first Miss America to ever perform a science demonstration on stage for the talent portion of the competition at Miss America. And I also advocate for medication safety and abuse prevention throughout my year as Miss America and formerly as Miss Virginia. So I'm really excited to be here with you, and I feel like I'm kind of in Richmond again.
Oh, good. So glad to have you. And trust me, you brighten up the night for everybody, I'm sure. Dan, what do you got, big dog?
Man, that's hard to follow. It really is. So anyway, I'm Dan Schneider, but most people know me as the pharmacist fame from the docuseries The Pharmacist. A couple of months ago, nobody knew me, okay? And it seems like a whole bunch do now. But I'm going to enjoy being on this. I'm going to enjoy being with Camille and you, John, and we're going to do some good on this program.
Well, I'm glad you're both here. I feel like I got two new best friends. You know, we had a really good warm-up, conversation, get everything right. But what I want to do, I kind of put a little slideshow together just to get a little background on some areas I want to talk about. And Todd, I know you got the slides ready. Let's start out with what the pharmacist used to look like in America. And as you can see, pharmacy back in the day, they had a little different reputation than what they were like today. It almost looked like a candy store, a bar, but it was a place where people went to get stuff that they liked, as well as stuff to heal you. Wow. And this is back from the 1800s, I do believe. And Todd, what's it look like? Recovery look like back in the 1800s? Because recovery is going to be our topic. As you can see, as far back, I'm talking 150 years ago. Even they had advocates back then that they got together, they got sober, they got clean, they became great citizens. And back then they had that big thing, the law must recognize the leading fact, medical, not penal, treatment reforms the drunkard. So we've had a lot of evidence for centuries almost on what works best to get people in recovery. And America took a twist along the way. And Todd, what do you got next for slides? Everybody that knows a little bit about the war on drugs, the history of addiction in America, Nixon, a top aide, John Eichelman, later admitted, you want to know what this was really about? The Nixon campaign in 1968. You're going too fast for me, Todd. You got to go back one. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House had two enemies, the anti-war left and the black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and then criminalize them both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Nixon temporarily placed marijuana in Schedule 1, the most restrictive category of drugs, pending review by a commission he appointed, led by Republican Pennsylvania Governor Raymond Schaefer. Todd, that next slide, please. In 1972, the commission unanimously recommended decriminalizing the possession and distribution of marijuana for personal use. Nixon ignored the report and rejected its recommendations. Between 1973 and 1977, however, 11 states decriminalized marijuana possession. In January 1977, President Jimmy Carter was inaugurated on a campaign platform that included marijuana decriminalization. In October 1977, the Senate Judiciary Committee voted to decriminalize possession of up to an ounce of marijuana for personal use. Within just a few short years, though, the tide had shifted. Proposals to decriminalize marijuana were abandoned as parents became increasingly concerned about high rates of teenage marijuana use. Marijuana was ultimately caught up in broader cultural backlash against the perceived permissiveness of the 1970s. Todd, what do you got next? There's a great book written. It was published in 1973, The American Disease. I recommend everybody get a copy and read it because this book actually really, you won't read a better book on the history of these drugs, what they did wrong, and why they got criminalized, basically. And it came out right as Nixon was launching his war on drugs. So that's a great book to read. A lot of stuff, I talk a lot of stuff, but I don't make this stuff up, man. I mean, this is all evidence-based data, you might say. What do you got, Todd? Now, if you blow that up, Todd, as you can see, in Portugal, drug-related death per million of people in 2015. For every million person, they had 6 deaths. In America, we have 245. These are overdose drug-related deaths. Next slide, Todd. Also in Portugal in 1999, they were arresting the hell out of these folks. But by 2008, they had over 25,000 people in rehab, which I think is pretty daggone good. What do you got, Todd? Now, this is an amazing chart right here. You look at the Portugal model. In 1999, they had 400 deaths. By 2018, they only had 34 deaths in their country. United States in 1999 had 16,000, almost 17,000 overdose deaths. By 2018, we had 68,000 overdose deaths. Now, Michigan is about the size of Portugal. In 2017, Michigan had 2,686 overdose deaths. Portugal, the same size country, only had 38. And that's because they did the Portugal model. They decriminalized, not legalized crime, but they decriminalized user amounts, and they dissuaded these people in the recovery and treatment. Next slide, Todd. Now, in 1999, you can see the disparity. 369 overdose deaths in Portugal. In 2016, 30. In the year 2000, they had 907 new HIV due to injecting. In 2017, they had 18. Number of people incarcerated for drug offenses. This is a big hit right here. 3,863. In 2017, they only had 1,140 people incarcerated for drug offenses. I mean, a huge drop. Todd, what do you got? I like to use Michigan a lot because Michigan's the same size as Portugal for population. Michigan's prison population in 2016, I believe, is the time on there. They have roughly 70,000 people. Portugal only has 14,000 people in their prison. So a huge shift took place in this country. What's up, Todd? Next slide. Now, here's a little hit video. I want to show this, and I recommend people, make a note of this video and watch it. Todd, run that video for a minute. This will summarize what I've been saying.
In 1986, when I was coming of age, Ronald Reagan doubled down on the war on drugs that had been started by Richard Nixon in 1971. Drugs were bad, fried your brain, and drug dealers were monsters. The sole reason neighborhoods and major cities were failing. No one wanted to talk about Reaganomics and the ending of social safety nets, the defunding of schools and the loss of jobs in cities across America. Young men like me who hustled became the sole villain, and drug addicts lacked moral fortitude. In the 1990s, incarceration rates in the U.S. blew up. Today, we imprison more people than any other country in the world. China, Russia, Iran, Cuba. All countries we consider autocratic and repressive. Yeah, more than them. Judges' hands were tied by tough on crime laws, and they were forced to hand out mandatory life sentences for simple possession and low-level drug sales. My home state of New York started this with Rockefeller laws. Then the feds made distinctions between people who sold powder cocaine and crack cocaine, even though they were the same drug. Only difference is how you take it. And even though white people used and sold crack more than black people, somehow it was black people who went to prison. The media ignored actual data to this day. Crack is still talked about as a black problem. The NYPD raided our Brooklyn neighborhoods while Manhattan bankers openly used coke with impunity. The war on drugs exploded the U.S. prison population, disproportionately locking away Black and Latinos. Our prison population grew more than 900%. When the war on drugs began in 1971, our prison population was 200,000. Today it is over 2 million. Long after the crack era ended, we continued our war on drugs. There were more than 1.5 million drug arrests in 2014. More than 80% were for possession only. Almost half were for marijuana. People are finally talking about treating addiction to harder drugs as a health crisis, but there's no compassionate language about drug dealers. Unless, of course, we're talking about places like Colorado, whose state economy got a huge boost by the above-ground marijuana industry. A few states south in Louisiana, they're still handing out mandatory sentences for people who sell weed. Despite a booming and celebrated 50 billion legal marijuana industry, most states still disproportionately hand out mandatory sentences to Black and Latinos with drug cases. If you're entrepreneurial and live in one of the many states that are passing legalized laws, you may still face barriers participating in the above-ground economy. Venture capitalists migrate to these states to open multi-billion-dollar operations, but former felons can't open a dispensary. Lots of times those felonies were drug charges, caught by poor people who sold drugs for a living, but are now prohibited from participating in one of the fastest growing economies. Got it? In states like New York, where holding marijuana is no longer grounds for arrest, police issue possession citations in Black and Latino neighborhoods at a far higher rate than other neighborhoods. Kids in Crown Heights are constantly stopped and ticketed for trees. Kids at dorms in Columbia, where rates of marijuana use are equal to or worse than those in the hood, are never targeted or ticketed. Rates of drug use are as high as they were when Nixon declared this so-called war in 1971. 45 years later, it's time to rethink our policies and laws. The war on drugs is an epic fail.
Now, Todd, we're going to hold up there for a minute. And, Dan, I tell you, after I watched The Pharmacist, that film, I got to thinking if we'd have done this years ago when we knew about it and didn't go down that war on drugs trail, your son may be alive today. And then I also remember you getting ahead of the opiate epidemic with your problem in your town. and
Right.
you were trying to blow that whistle left and right, but you're up against the machine, and the machine, it's like they know best, but they were destroying us. So I was wondering your thoughts, and then Camille, I'll get you to weigh in on what you just saw.
Yeah.
Dan, you go first.
Yeah, well, the one thing I want to add in is with street drugs, marijuana, and even heroin, and crack particularly, the black community suffered more than the white community. But with the opiate epidemic, it kind of flipped. The majority of overdose deaths are far white, and it's not. I would even say it's probably per capita. It's a white coat type of situation. It's a doctor and it's a pharmacist filling it. So it's the route that the white population took. But they didn't just go to jail; they went to the grave.
Yeah, Camille, you got any new thoughts popping in your head?
Yeah, so I am particularly interested, and we were talking about this a little bit before, on that decriminalization piece and how so many people are being, issued, they're going to court, they're getting these, not even citations, they're actually getting criminal charges for these drug possessions, even for things like marijuana. And my jury is out on whether or not I think that marijuana should really be legalized like it is in Colorado, but independent of that, when I look at how, because I'm traveling around the country as Miss America, I'm meeting people who have maybe been affected. They have been charged with, drug possession. The biggest thing is that these people then struggle to find employment, and that can turn their life in this downward spiral that is not conducive to effective recovery if they are in an addiction situation. And so that's been something that I have continuously seen, and where I think that we really need to make some change. And so I saw a lot of that in what we just watched. And so that's something that I'm particularly interested in exploring.
Yeah, our system actually strips the hope from people who need help. And hope is one of the biggest ingredients why people want to get clean and stay clean.
Mm-hmm.
I like the marijuana piece because marijuana is less harmful than alcohol and tobacco, and it should be treated equal. And when they did the war on drugs, what they did was legalize the black market at the top level, because a lot of people making a lot of money legally off of the black market and off of the drug war. And just because it's legal don't make it right. And we need people to change that. So Dan, you've been in the space now for advocating for change. Are we making any progress at all?
Well, I can tell you this: the Portugal situation would be a paradigm shift, and that's exactly what we need. I've been involved since my son died for over 20 years, and on the docuseries, it really looks like they show all my successes. They don't show my failures, okay? But the real failure is, when I started out, overdose deaths were at a certain rate, okay? And they haven't went down, they've went up. And they've kind of peaked now. So, I'm not saying I'm a failure, because I do believe all of us have been working in advocacy. If we hadn't done what we did, it would even be worse, okay? But we really haven't reduced it that much. And so, you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. You got an example like Portugal where they decriminalized this, and it's just so much better, because so many people's lives are destroyed when they get criminal for possession and whatnot. They can't get the right kind of jobs, which leads them sometimes into selling drugs, because that's a way to make money. Yeah. And we just have the whole thing reversed. We've got to flip this and start having compassion and empathy, and remove the stigma, and move forward to decentralization. These people won't be criminals. They shouldn't be criminals.
Camille, you may not realize this, but during Prohibition, I know you know about Prohibition, they didn't actually go into people's homes and arrest people for drinking. It really wasn't illegal for people to possess alcohol in their homes, consume it in their homes. So really the user at home, they never got bothered. It was only when people were manufacturing it and selling it. But yet the drug war, they arresting all these little guys using the stuff, and it's created this, not only a bigger black market, but it has crushed the taxpayers, I think. And in those PowerPoints, those slides earlier, less corrections, more treatment, a whole lot less death. Does that sound plausible to you, Camille?
I hope so. I think that that's interesting that you talk about that people are allowed to do that in their homes. I think that in terms of people that are getting prosecuted right now, I think that we need to shift the focus more on prosecuting the people that are actually distributing these drugs. And it was funny when I was in Virginia. Well, you're in Richmond, so one of the potential bills that's going into Virginia's legislation is charging those who gave someone drugs that led to an overdose death, actually charging them with homicide and with manslaughter. And so going to those sources rather than going after the people who are taking the drugs. And it's that I start to see more as a shift. I'm not sure how that works in the Portugal model. Are they, I guess, decriminalization of the people that are possessing drugs, but I would presume that they would still be prosecuting those who are dealing.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yes.
If you're dealing drugs, you're in prison. Those are the guys in prison. The dealers. So
that's what we need to do.
Exactly.
But they do allow the user, they call that consumer choice. If a consumer does die, if they got the dealer, they got the dealer. If they don't, they don't. See, a lot of people don't realize it, but if you sell drugs to somebody and they die, there's already laws on the book to get you 20 years for that.
Wow.
To keep creating more drug laws that create more tax burden that deprive the recovery tracks and the treatment tracks from getting those valuable tax dollars. So
yeah,
I don't think we need any more drug laws. We got plenty of drug laws. I think we need to start shifting tax dollars for recovery, treatment, prevention, and unfortunately people are going to die. They drink themselves to death. They smoke them to death. Diabetes, sugar's killing people. Consumer choice.
One of the things that I've seen particularly throughout my job is, we were talking a little bit about Narcan. And so Narcan, of course, is the opioid overdose reversal medication. And when people, so I'm a pharmacy student, and when people come into the hospital, many times, if they're revived with Narcan, they're like, okay, great, you're good now. And they let them go and they go back into their normal life. And there isn't that step of bringing them into recovery in many situations. And I think that that's something that as a society we're missing. So when someone is possessing a drug on their person, if they do overdose, are we getting them the right resources that they need to overcome those things?
That's a slow process, but we should have hope dealers at every step of the way of an addict, whether in an overdose situation, in a correctional situation, a courtroom, in the streets, in the community. See, Portugal, they do a lot of engagement, outreach and engagement. And in America, we're slowly getting there, but it's an unfunded system. You know what I mean? The more money we fund for outreach and engagement, recovery and treatment, the less money we'll need for these other industries that seem to be part of the problem. Yeah. Dan, I was gonna ask you.
When you pause, I got something I want to interject on it.
All right, go ahead, say it now.
Well, it's this reverse system of what rewards people with. For instance, I'm gonna give you an example. When I was chasing this doctor down and trying to shut her down, I went to the DEA and I brought a kid, and he's in a docuseries. He's a cab driver now. Okay, his name is Robbie. Okay, and I brought him to the DEA because he had went into her office. Okay, he was kind of like my seated guy in her office. He also worked on computers and whatnot. Okay, so she asked if he could fix her printer or her computer or something like that. So Robbie went in there, and when he was finished doing the job, then he asked for his a payment, and they handed him a couple of prescriptions. And he said, no. He says, I can't take this because I work for somebody. I got to bring them money.
Right.
Okay? And so they said, look, you better take this and get the heck out of here. Now, in all honesty, those prescriptions were worth more. If somebody came in, they had to pay $300 to get those prescriptions. Okay. And I think the repair bill was $200. Okay. So now I bring Robbie to the DEA to tell them that we're trying to nail down this doctor. Okay. Now, Robbie's kind of a street kid. Okay. He's had a few little drug issues himself, and he knows other kids that maybe sell pills a little bit or exchange pills, or they have a little habit themselves. Well, guess what the DEA does with him? Okay. When we go in there, I bring this young man in, he's a witness. Okay. They wound up threatening to arrest him if he doesn't rat out on his friends that are taking drugs. and selling drugs. And why do they do that? Okay, because their system says the more people we arrest. Well, it's not easy to arrest dealers. It's easy to arrest.
Oh, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, man. It's low hanging fruit, man.
I jumped all over their butts. Okay, I mean, I said I brought this kid up here, and he's honestly telling you something. We're trying to get the big fish that's killing everybody, and you're worried about a couple of kids that's taking pills. If we decriminalize that, they would not have that incentive. Okay, they couldn't arrest their way. They would have to spend their time on dealers. Right now, they're spending their time on users.
Well, it's just to me, it's just an incredible waste of insanity, if you ask me. Right. Camille, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree. I think that we need to focus the energy, and that was kind of what I was mentioning before. We need to focus the energy on the source. I'm definitely, from a pharmacy and medical professional perspective, you wouldn't just like keep putting a Band-Aid on something. You want to figure out what the actual source of the problem is, and if we can cut that from the root, that's the biggest way that we can make a difference. And I'm definitely an advocate, and a lot of the work that I do is the prevention of the addiction from happening. So I'm still learning about what we can do to help people get into great recovery programs. But if we can stop it at the source, I mean, goodness, we can make a difference in so many people's lives.
Camille, let me ask you a question. After I watched what Dan went through, now one piece I noticed, he's sitting at that pharmacy counter filling prescriptions. He knows it's abusive. He knows these kids shouldn't be getting these Oxycontins and these most powerful pain pills. He knows it's a racket. Do you think as a pharmacist you could do that? Knowingly and willingly feeding somebody's addiction? That is
a very interesting question. And that was, I think, probably one of my first questions when I got into pharmacy school is, do I have an ethical perspective? From an ethical perspective, do I need to fill a prescription legally that I don't agree with? And if you watch Dan in the docuseries, he didn't want to fill a lot of them, but there's also the money component where like you're maybe potentially working for a larger conglomerate that is dependent upon those prescriptions being filled. So it's a lot of different pieces. But from an ethical perspective, I'd be calling the doctor just like Dan did and being like, what is this for? And I would really struggle filling it. And I really felt a lot of empathy when I watched Dan in a situation where one of the patients actually died from those particular medications. I would feel a huge amount of personal responsibility in that. And I'm sure that Dan probably felt that in that moment. And that is exactly why we as pharmacists have a huge responsibility, because many times we are the ones handing that medication over. And so many times do these opioid addictions come from prescription medications first and then spiral into heroin.
And there's a whole lot of folks on a whole lot of pills out there. You got benzodiazepine, you got Adderall, you got Vyvanse.
So much.
And you guys, you're at the counter. You can identify these doctor shoppers, these BSers, but you're going to be in a position, your job going to depend on you being part of the system that's broken. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a pharmacist.
A little bit, being a pharmacist, for most pharmacists, unless you're really a greedy pharmacist, and they do have their share of pill mill type pharmacists, okay, who could care less. It's all about the dollar. But there are plenty of pharmacists that are stuck in between, okay? They want to have a business and a profit for their boss or for their company, and these doctors are writing these prescriptions, and you can say no, okay? It's definitely legal to say no, and but they will go down the street, and I'm not saying that means you should fill it, okay? I couldn't do it, okay? But somebody's going to go down the street. You got to get the doctors. You really got to get the doctors and all the pharmacy boards and medical boards. They got to cut down on these mind-altering drugs. It's gotten out of hand. It's an old book now, but it's a book by John Califato that I read a bunch of years back, and it's the term is high society. Mm-hmm. That tells you what the book's about.
I think I read that book, man. I remember that book.
The sad thing about that book, I read that book, and for a while that was sort of my Bible, and so I ordered like about a dozen of them, used on Amazon to hand them out. And when I got them, they all had stamps on them, library stamps.
Oh yeah.
Which meant they went to the libraries and nobody ever read them. They all look like brand new. And so one of the reasons why I always thought that if I could make a movie in a docuseries where you could tell a story and still get your education and your message in, okay? And if you could do that and people would pay attention, that has sort of happened in the docuseries. In other words, when we do films about advocacy and recovery, you got to mix some entertainment in there or else you lose people along the way, you know. And the other thing that Camille brought to our attention is if we can reduce the amount of money we spend on incarceration, then we can spend more money on prevention and education, okay? We're limited right now because all the money's going to incarceration and paying DEA agents to arrest kids that got 20 pills in their hand that they shouldn't have.
I mean, the way the drug laws, I could talk for days on how bad they are. But Camille, you're the youngest one on the panel here, and you're the closest one.
No, she's not.
You're the one closest to, you know, the teenagers in the early 20s and the mid 20s, and you're watching this wildness all around you. I'm assuming. Certainly, you must see a lot of addiction in your lifetime and where you're at.
I'm really lucky to say that I haven't seen a lot of addiction in my lifetime. I've seen people misuse a lot of medications and drugs throughout my time in college.
And alcohol. Alcohol is a drug.
Alcohol. The biggest thing, and so because I was always really focused on academics, I saw more than anything a lot of students misusing Adderall and Vyvanse because using it for school. And that was a big deal, is that kids would sell their Adderall and Vyvanse in college to allow other kids to study all night long. That sounds like a nightmare to me. I can't even imagine, and that is the biggest abuse of actual prescription medication that I've seen personally. But I feel very fortunate that I haven't experienced a lot of my friends or people that I know who were kind of turning to those harder medications. I remember a couple of kids trying to sell Oxy in school and just being like, looking at them and being like, do you realize that you could ruin your life or someone else's?
Do you know anybody that has died? Anybody you went to high school or college with that overdosed and died? Or,
you know, a guy I used to work with, I worked at a pharmaceutical company, actually. I did an internship for 2 summers, and I went there one summer, worked with this one team member, came back the next year, and one of the team members was gone. And they told me, they're like, you know, that particular team member passed away last year. He died of a heroin overdose. And he was someone that you would have never expected would be addicted to heroin. And so that was probably my first experience with someone that had died of a drug overdose. And, you know, I have family friends that have struggled with addiction throughout their life, but I didn't really, quite honestly, and this shows how lucky I am to have this background. I didn't really have a personal experience, but when I went to that I went to my first Narcan training as a pharmacy student. And when I saw just the data and the numbers of people that are dying from opioids every year that could be saved by something like Narcan, I was like, this needs to be why are we not talking about this more? And that's kind of why I ended up.
I would bet money that every single day between me and Dan, we get the call that somebody died, an overdose or addiction.
I can't imagine.
You know, we live in a space, like I got the message of a kid today that died. You know, this morning, first thing I got a text, so-and-so died. I bet Dan gets one a day, one every other day. We're part of social groups that are fighting, you know,
when I worked at the drugstore, the OxyContin was really popular then. We had a death list of people that we anticipated dying. Okay, it's sad. Okay, and some of these people now we ran off. We stopped filling their prescriptions, but they got them filled somewhere. And sure enough, you know, you'd look in the death notices every week, and we say another one gone. I mean, it was absolutely. I would go to the funerals, and at the funerals there would be kids crying about their friend that died. Okay, and then next week, the ones that were crying were in the coffin. You know,
It's amazing how that is. You know, when I was 21, I probably knew 2 or 3 people in my whole life that overdosed and died. Now I might have known a half a dozen that got killed in a DUI, you know, drinking and driving. But man, in 2020, it is all around us. You know, we're losing between opiates, alcohol, and these other drugs. It's got to be 200,000-300,000 people a year nationwide. I mean, it's just so many people out there. So, Dan, what have you seen? What have you seen work for recovery though, since you've been around this space?
Well, you know, honestly, I'm going to be a little bit honest there. Okay, that's not maybe my forte. I will say this: I used to write articles in the newspaper trying to make people aware and discourage drug use and educate them. Okay, and I would pay to put them in the papers and run these things. And eventually, there were some people that would call upon me and say, "Dan, I need help." Okay, so I took on some personal recovery, you might say, some lost cases where the parents called out to me and said, "Look, I read your articles. I know you're a guy that cares. I know you know a lot about this. Would you help me with my son?" Okay. And let me tell you what my experience was. And I don't want to discourage other people that are in recovery, okay, because it takes a special kind of person to do that. And John, if that's your forte, great. We need people to do that, okay? But I dealt with these 10 kids, okay? And today, 7 of them are dead, okay? And at one time, I had, I think, 4 that were alive, okay? And one of these kids really took an interest in me, and he thanked me for saving his life. And then what happened one time, he got married, and he had a child, and he had a good life, and he would contact me every now and then. It was one of my good success stories, you know, out of, 60% losses, but 40% okay. And then what happened, his wife broke up with him, and he started to go back to drugs, and he was so committed not to go back to drugs that he put a gun to his head and killed himself.
Yeah.
As opposed to doing the drug. And so I almost thought, I wish he would have done the drug. You know, and so
yeah.
like, you know, so my experience with recovery, now I am studying recovery because I want to be a leader, and I want to be able to offer people a different situations, you know. So, but I'm not the recovery. Let me make a point of what, you know, I'm trying to do. And another thing that relates to what you just said about getting phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
When I was also doing my advocacy, after I shut the doctor down, after I found my son's killer, and then after I went with and helped create the pharmacy monitoring program, okay, and then I was going after Purdue, okay, and back then I wasn't thinking about suing Purdue, but what I came up with this idea that we could tax all the opiate prescriptions, and then we could make them put up like signs, like the gambling people do, and the tobacco people do. Watch out for addiction. If you have a problem, call. And so I went to try to get to all the senators and congressmen. And I happened to link up with a Senator Vitter, which is a Republican senator, and he had a little clout. Okay. And I talked to him about this idea, and he said, you know, Dan, this is a pretty good idea. You know, we really ought to be able to do this thing. They're causing a lot of damage. It's costing all the states money. And so let's go ahead and we'll increase the price on this a little bit and tax it. Okay. And that, sometimes if you increase the price, usage goes down, maybe. Okay. But
yeah, for alcohol, it goes down. For beer, the higher the beer tax, the lower the alcohol consumption by
that's one positive. But the second positive, you generate some dollars, okay? And you can use that for prevention. So he liked the idea, and he said, well, I'm going to work on it. And sound like to me, you know, I'm always like, well, when are you going to do this? Okay. It's not talk about it, it's action. So in any event, 3 or 4 months go by and I hear nothing. Okay. So I called David Vitter up, okay, and I reach him. I got like a cell phone, okay. And he says, well, Dan, you know, I've been trying to do this, but you know, it takes time, and kind of gives me the yang. And he said, but look, I want you to talk to my first assistant. He was a guy named David Doss. Okay. And I went to speak with David, his first assistant. We sit down and we talk about the issue. And he starts with the same thing. He starts saying, well, you know, Dan, you got to take small bites of the apple. And, you know, this bureaucracy and politics, and it's going to take a while. But, you know, we understand your passion. Okay. Well, in the middle of this, I get a phone call from my drugstore. And I can't hear well, so I usually put it on speaker. Okay. So I put it on speaker. And it's my drugstore calling and telling me one of our patients overdosed and died while I'm talking to him. Okay. So he all of a sudden, he's, it's kind of like it hits him that this is real. This man's talking about this, but he just lost a patient.
Right.
So you know what he winds up saying? He winds up saying, well, Dan, okay, I understand your passion, and I know what you're up against, okay, and we're all going to work on this, but these things take time. And I'm going to tell you what the problem is, Dan. Not enough people are dying. That's right.
Yeah,
let me make a point here now, okay? I didn't know what to say. I really didn't know what to say, because number one, the statistics really weren't horrible at that time, but I knew way more were dying than the statistics were revealing. Back then in early 2000s, coroners and parents didn't want their kids going down as overdose deaths. So there was a lot of cover-up, okay? But even still, to make that kind of comment, but I had nothing to come back with. And so what I'm trying to develop now is what I call a people's lobby. Okay. I want to collect all these groups out there that are in advocacy. Okay. In some kind of way, join them and connect them. Okay. So that when we go to like the state legislatures, or we go to the federal government, okay, and we maybe have a 500,000 or 1 million followers, okay, half of which are parents that lost kids, okay. And when we sit down and talk about this stuff and they start giving us the yeah, like I heard, okay, and we say, well, you know what? I don't like the yeah, and this 1 million people behind me don't either, okay? And you're going to get hundreds of thousands of phone calls and emails. And let me tell you, if that doesn't make you take some action, okay, we will have these mothers of these kids, the lost kids, march in the streets. In other words, I want us to have people power to match up with the stupid lobbyists and these politicians that always say, well, you got to take bites at the apple. There's bureaucracy you have to deal with. While this is going on, people are dying 130 a day, okay? They got to have a sense of urgency. But you've got to twist their arms. They don't do this.
Hey, let me help you out on this one. Look right now what's happening in America, COVID-19.
Right.
All of a sudden, we got an epidemic, a crisis, and they broke every rule in Congress. They discontinued the use of the Constitution. They spent $5 trillion we don't have. No money's big enough. No policies is important. And they are scrambling, doing anything they can. Yet we got an epidemic been going on for 50 years. More people died since Nixon declared war on drugs in America than every war America's ever fought in. And people, how do we get people to care about this epidemic? It baffles me that we have this quagmire.
But I have found, at least since this documentary came out, I have found that there's a lot of people that care. They don't know how to bring their power to make a difference. Okay. I have found that there's a tremendous amount of advocacy groups. There's a whole bunch of mothers that have lost kids that have formed groups. And there's 100 here and 200 there and 400 there and 1,400 here and 10,000 here. Okay. And yet, they don't all actually get together in a sense. And I don't mean all work together.
We do lack cohesiveness. You're right about that.
Yeah. And so you got to collect that power. And I call it a people's lobby. Okay. You got to have somebody, if it's John, if you go up there, but we have a lobby of 1 million people. And like your wife did this kind of stuff. Okay. She worked with the government. Okay. But if she could say, look, if you don't make this happen, or if you don't try to meet us halfway, okay, you're going to get a bunch of emails. And not only that, these 1 million followers that we have, they vote.
Yeah, you know how much money.
This is the language that they know.
Dan, how much money you think the recovery people we spend in Washington lobbying for laws? The pharmaceutical industry, it's like $1 billion to 1. We don't have a snowball chance in hell getting legislation passed if we don't align ourselves nationwide. All these folks, there's thousands of groups out there. You're right about that. Camille, I'm watching you shake your head. You got 2 old guys here, one in recovery, one fighting for meaning of losing it. So what do you make of this?
I cannot agree more with Dan. People do care. People absolutely do care. I have people come up to me every single time I am somewhere talking about drug safety and abuse prevention. people care. It's almost like an emotional response for many people because they have family members that have been touched by it. They've been touched by it. But I find that one of the biggest things is that people don't know what they can actually do to help. And so I think that what Dan is doing is really powerful because it allows people to take that energy because it's there and it's an emotional raw energy and then put that towards something that is able to really help. And that's even something that I struggle with in my job is like, I want to be able to solve this problem, but what are the things that we can do as a team to come together and help this really be an issue or really, fight this issue. And Dan was talking about, the putting money aside for like the 1-800 gambling thing, except with drugs. The other thing that I find really interesting is I've heard stories of like when we're locking down these opioid medications and some of these other prescription medications that have abuse potential, then it turns people that are already addicted more towards street drugs. And then that's been a secondary issue that I hear about when I'm traveling. And so the entire situation tends to be a catch-22 because you do one thing and then it kind of dominoes down the entire actual supply chain of where the drugs are going.
It's a phrase for that, but I don't want to use it on the show here. But you can imagine it's cluster, and I'll let you fill in the other one.
Precisely. But so my question for you as someone who is more of a recovery specialist, what are things that people can actually do? Like the average person, what can we do to help in terms of, helping people in recovery, preventing this from spreading? What are things I can tell people when I'm traveling?
Well, I think I would let me read a paragraph of what one of the leading scientists in America says about what's the solution for our addiction epidemic. Todd, you got that Dr. DuPont?
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, blow that up for a minute, Todd. All right, Dr. DuPont, the city of Richmond a couple years ago had, this big summit. How do we help these people? What's the solution? Dr. DuPont, the answer to most of it lies with people who live the experience of addiction, said DuPont. He's worked for 17 White House drug czars, 14 heads of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. He said that there's a lot of discouragement in our field and a lot of frustration, but there's one thing that's still growing, and that's the recovering community. He said that is our answer, 25 million strong and growing. We can look to that community for what to do and how they're doing it. Now, Camille, I want to add a little value to that.
Yeah.
Todd, pop up what the drug czar said about McShin. Recently, Jim Carroll, he's the director of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, and he wrote an editorial, a front page commentary this past Recovery Month. He said, last April, I had the privilege of participating in the Faces and Voices of Recovery Award ceremony of the McShin Foundation, which is based in Richmond area. The ceremony provided an opportunity to recognize some of those who have helped their fellow Virginians make tremendous strides on their recovery journey. Since its founding in 2004, McShin Foundation has been one of Virginia's leading nonprofit full-service recovery community organizations. Over the past 15 years, McShin Foundation has proved that recovery works and that healing is possible. It is the transformative and life-changing, and it is a positive experience. As a result of the efforts of the McShin Foundation and others, lives are being saved in Virginia, and ultimately, that is what the fight against addiction is all about. It's the recovering community. Yeah. It's the people in recovery. We're the ones that should be at the policy table. We're the ones that should get a portion of funding. And Virginia, Todd, pop up that little money bit that Virginia got. There's the state opioid response money, the Trump bump. Trump sent $39 billion to Virginia, and then another 4.6 million. I mean, 39 million and 4.6 million. That's $43.5 million. Yeah. And I don't know if McShin got one penny of it. So our system is broke from top to bottom. It's broke at the policy level. It's broke at the tax collection redistribution level. It's just a mess. But what you guys can do, Dan, I'm going to pile on to your issues and your causes. I need your people to pile on to ours. Camille, I'm going to praise you to the day I die, and you need to do the same for us. And when you see an event with recovery, you speak up. Say, man, these guys, the stigma, we got to reduce the stigma. We got to support each other. That's how we get change done.
You're right. You're right. The stigma is everything.
Yeah, and Purdue, there's a lawsuit out against Purdue Pharma, and there's a lawsuit out against Big Pharma and whatnot. But right now, hey Todd, you got that number? Right now, if you or your family member had a problem with OxyContin, you got to the end of June to contact these people right here and get involved with that lawsuit, because that's one thing corporate America understands is lawsuits.
Yep.
and it's a damn shame these top dogs that killed so many people with these drugs are going to get away with it, and they're going to end up with fines they can live with. But it's the pocketbook is what the big dogs understand. So you guys got to sign up for these lawsuits, get involved, and Dan, I'm sure you're involved with this a little bit. I would hope so.
I am. In fact, on our docuseries, they had an attorney at the end that met with me. His name is Walter Leger. He was very instrumental in the tobacco suit. And now he's involved in the opiate situation. And me and him are already talking about where is this money going to go when we actually get it. So we're not only trying to get it now, but in the past, when they did get a few dollars, very little of it went to recovery. Very little of it got where it was supposed to be.
In the 2007 Purdue Pharma lawsuit, Virginia got, like, don't quote me exactly, I'm going to say $50 million. I don't think they spent $100,000 on recovery at the CSB level. I think it all went to state police. It went to, policing agencies and whatnot. I mean, it was disgraceful.
But John, listen, let me just tell you, if we had a big lobby, okay, a nationwide one, that can get us to the federal government for policy, okay? But then you're going to have state groups, okay? And if you can go to the state politicians and you can have the same kind of pressure, if they know that in the state there's 10,000 people that are going to email them, that are going to call the news media, okay, that they're going to write op-eds in the newspaper, okay, if they know they're going to catch a lot of heat for this stuff, okay, the people that care, if we can get them to speak out, or at least speak out through us as leaders to back us up, we can make these state people, we can monitor when they get the dollars, that the dollars go where they're supposed to go. Okay. Walter and I are working.
Well, welcome to bureaucracy. That's my money. You hands off my money. It's crazy.
You know what they listen to now? If they think they're going to get bad publicity and embarrassed, if they think that maybe they might going to get voted for, okay, they listen. Now, I'm not saying you get the whole loaf of bread. Okay, right. But if 50 million goes to Virginia, if we could get half of it to recovery, okay, but you got to have a lobbyist in there, a people's lobby in there that fights to get our share, okay.
Well, I know exactly where to find one. You know what I mean? But
yes,
absolutely.
So Camille, what are you thinking, man? What are your thoughts?
I completely agree that we need to put more money toward recovery. I mean, so I've just been reading this book called Dope Sick by Beth Macy, and she's out of Roanoke.
Oh yeah, it's a great book, man.
I love that book.
Great book.
Yeah.
And I don't think I really understood so much. Like, we can get rid of the drugs off the street. We can, shut down the supply chain, but there's still people that are addicted, and quite literally are physically addicted and need medical intervention to get them back on the right track, both physically and psychologically. And so why are we not super focused on appropriate recovery for those people? Because you can stop the drug supply chain, but then you have a bunch of quite literally dope sick people on the street who need help or in their homes. And why are we not focused on that? I think
there is a lot of movement on that, though. But what is still a big problem is when these people ask for help, it's still hard to get them the help when they ask for it, when they're open-minded. That's the big crack in the system right there. Yeah. I can get anybody in Virginia on Suboxone or methadone in about 3 weeks. When I get their Medicaid to come through, I hook them up with the provider. But 3 weeks, man, my God, they could be dead or in jail for committing a serious crime.
Exactly. And there's the mental health perspective too, of like, why are people turning to these medications? Why are they falling into addictive behaviors in the first place? really going to the root of the issue, I think is so important.
Trauma's at the root of a lot of that.
Exactly. And so I have a cousin that's currently deployed overseas, and I know that veterans especially are so much at a higher risk of people that are suffering from addiction. Like, why are we not helping these people that are, struggling? And I think just from a human perspective, this is not their fault. And that is another thing, is that people, we talk about the stigma, is that people think that it's like, oh, of course, well, you just, made a bad choice. This is your choice to deal with. It's like, okay, well, you can make a bad choice once and end up in a really terrible downward spiral. And so we need to have some empathy for those people. We need to help people. It's a human issue.
Dan, we might have a champion, man. What do you think?
We got a champion. And look, hey, we got, look, it's a crazy story how me and Camille kind of came together. It's an unbelievable story. But and just the fact that she's a pharmacy student and she's got the same platform as us. And this is a year when we're going to push. Yeah. We're going to make something happen. Okay, and it's great that. How does that happen? That we get a Miss America that is going to fight with us? It's incredible. Let me just. I won't go through the elaborate story, but I connect with Camille two ways. One, because she's a pharmacy student and she's got our platform. But the other thing is, when I was trying to get my docuseries done, the paperwork and all, I had to get an attorney. Okay, and I shopped around for an attorney, and I came up with this kind of I don't mean to put it down, kind of a hippie type lady attorney. She's a lovable creature, she really is, and she's brilliant. Okay, a lot of people probably might be a little bit skeptical of her, but she went to work and she did a great job for me. She absolutely did, and she even bought into my story a little bit. I had to tell her my story for her to write the contracts. Okay, and so like she says, look, when this thing comes up, make sure you let me know. Well, when it came out, I forgot to call. Okay, I forgot to call a lot of people. Okay, so about 4 days go by, and me and my wife are laying in bed, and we get a phone call. Okay, and it's this a lady. Her name is Suzette. She's the attorney, and I haven't heard from her a year and a half. Okay, and she says, Dan. And at first, I didn't even realize who she is. Okay, and then she says, this is Suzette, the attorney, and geez, everybody's talking about this, and it's really so great, and I'm so happy. And I said, yeah, I know, Camille, I appreciate that. Okay, and she says, I got something better than that. And I said, what? Well, guess who I just signed and represent? I said, who, Suzette? Camille Schrier, Miss America. Wow. This little attorney that I pick out, okay,
in New Orleans.
By the way, is also
in New Orleans.
Yes. And so that was an initial contact. Then
how do you get a lawyer in New Orleans, Camille?
Hey, wait. Look.
Through someone here in my town.
The one thing, there's something else we haven't brought out here, okay? And I hope this doesn't turn anybody off, okay? But, in recovery, and I don't know how we implement this, but Christian recovery or religious-based recovery or spiritual-based recovery, okay, is so much more successful than regular recovery, okay? And that's got to be incorporated. But I'm also going to say, and I don't want to go off the deep end, okay, some of the things that happened to make me successful on those trials and to get by without getting killed, okay, and then right now in my advocacy to run into this situation, I don't think these things are coincidence, okay? I think there's something happening here, and we need that. Because when this many people are dying, we need anything we can get. So
that old footprints in the sand.
Yes,
that's my story, man. I mean, if it weren't for God, I wouldn't be here right now, man. So
I'm glad you were on board on that. That we all have to be on board for that. If that turns somebody off, well, that's tough. And look,
well, hey, I'm here for them too. Yeah, I don't say no to nobody. I love them all, man.
That's right. But the spiritual element, if we have it, it helps. Okay.
Most preachers I get around, I'm more Jesus-like than most preachers, man. You should see them go fishing with me. I get them cussing and everything, man. I mean, I have fun with them. Well, we're hitting the witching hour. Camille, next time in Richmond, I know you're a Narcan trainer.
Mm-hmm.
I'll set you up a nice Narcan train. I'll get you into McShin. Awesome. You can do a training for our people and get to know a little more about recovery. Dan, our door is always open to you, big dog. I'll get
I
you
gotta
up
know a
there
little
when
bit
this,
more. I do
when
have to
yeah,
work
when
on the program.
COVID slows down, I'll get you up there for sure. Closing thoughts, Camille, you go first, then Dan.
I mean, gosh, I've seen this issue firsthand throughout the whole country as I go around and meet people. I think that talking to you both and starting to know your background and, you know, in conjunction with all the things that I've seen on the front lines, it's just more motivation that we need to address this issue. Definitely interesting talks on the decriminalization piece. I think that we definitely need to move toward the Portugal model. And as I potentially get some opportunities to advocate on Capitol Hill this year, we can talk about that.
And I do want the viewers to know that Camille, I mean, you spend, I guess, a good portion of your life. You hit the pinnacle, Miss America. You get to go around the country and do all these great things, and then boom, COVID-19 hits. And I found out that you're sheltered in place with your parents.
I am
going around seeing the country, so.
I usually travel around 20,000 miles a month and change cities between every 24 to 72 hours. And now I've been in my childhood home for 40 days. So it's been an interesting year.
Much worse, man.
It's been wonderful. I mean, it's, just completely changed it's not a job that's supposed to be done from home. I'm supposed to be out like with the public.
Exactly.
But I'm going to do a lot of elbow bumps for the rest of my year, I think.
There you go. Dan, closing thoughts, big guy.
Well, for one thing, thank you, John. This is really a great program. I'm going to make a little plug here, okay? And my plug is I'm trying to build that nationwide group and link groups. So if there's any groups out there that are listening, I like to speak with their leaders. You can call me, you can email me. My website is tunnelofhope.org. Contact me. My email is dschneider@tofhope.com. And I also have a Facebook group page, Supporters of Dan Schneider, the Pharmacist. Okay. And contact me any which way and join us and let's pull everybody together. Because let me also say this. I love the fact that the Portugal thing is a paradigm shift and it's a big change because I think we really need that. Okay. And if we end decriminalization, we can get more funds to focus on the recovery and such. Okay. But let me tell you, that paradigm shift is not going to be easy to sell. Okay. We're going to run into a lot of opposition on this thing, okay? And the people that are against it are going to spread rumors that it's a step toward legalization, okay? And the whole world's going to come apart, okay? And so, like, it gets back to if we got a lobby that can speak for us, and if we got a lot of parents that are willing to go out there and protest or speak up or write op-eds, we're going to need to do battle on this to get this through, to even get 3/4 of it through. For one thing, the Portugal thing, they call it a 90-10 change, okay? Well, maybe in our country, it's got to be a 70-30 change, okay? But it's still got to be a big flip, okay? Because right now in our country, it's kind of 90-10.
Yeah, okay? I think you're right. We need the big flip. But, look, I'm all for the decriminalization, but I think marijuana needs to go legal like alcohol. That's one of my things. But I'll take what we can get. But I know a no-brainer when I see one. Hey, just for the record, though, my wife, she is an expert. And she told me, look, I'll help you guys. I'm good for 1 or 2 free hits, but good Lord, I can't go full time with you guys unless we work something out. So I think I got you a starter hit on a lobbyist in Washington. So I'll hook you two up. Hey, gang, man, I love you guys. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. We got each other's contacts. You get bored, you need a live stream to go on. I know lots of folks, let's keep the conversation moving amongst our people. You know what I mean? And I hope to see you all soon. And God bless you both. And thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for listening, man. More later from Mechanicsville, Virginia, actually. We'll see you later. Good night.
God bless you, too.
Yeah.
She's got a megaphone in her hand, black boots on the street. She's got traction, she's got friction, she's bringing the heat. I gotta tell you, I've never seen anything like this before. She's got a power over me and I just can't take it no more. Fire, fire, yeah, we're gonna set it on. Fire, fire, yeah, we're gonna set it on. Fire, fire, come on. She's got a briefcase of cash,